Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. He's been called many things, including baffling, visionary, obstinate, and brilliant, voluble and self-absorbed, an aloof elitist, a prideful plutocrat who was allergic to introspection, absurdly coarse, and oddly insensitive, an autocrat of the people, an untouchable, and on midnight on December 31st of this year, out of a job. He's Michael Bloomberg, and joining me to analyze, dissect, and likely disagree on Mike Bloomberg's 12 years, his legacy, his future are Joyce Purnick, Angelo Falcon, and Errol Lewis. Joyce joined the New York Times in 1979. She has reported, edited, and written columns for the Times, and in 2009 published Mike Bloomberg, Money, Power, Politics. Errol Lewis is New York One's host of The Road to City Hall, Inside City Hall, and political scientist Angelo Falcon, who has been advocating to improve Hispanic political clout for decades. He's the author of Latinos in New York and editor of a number of books and scores of articles. Welcome, all of you.
Good to be here.
There are going to be, it's going to be less than a week to the final tick of the clock in the bullpen. And we would expect a spate of retrospectives. City and State just had a survey of the greatest mayors in the city, and Mike Bloomberg was voted number 2. How did you see Mike Bloomberg? All of you have long perspectives. Right. How do you see Mike Bloomberg in the sweep of mayors that you've covered?
I've covered 6, going back to Lindsay, just the last few days of Lindsay.
We'll count it.
People are always trying to figure out what somebody's legacy is going to be and where they're going to
right.
Where they're going to be in history. And you know what? We don't really know. We cannot know until we have some perspective.
Right.
We're right there right now. He's still in City Hall. If you ask me today, I think that he is indeed going to go down as one of the most effective mayors in New York City's history. One of the least liked in terms of people like sort of, there was once this poll question, you remember?
Yes.
Would you like to go out to lunch with him? I don't think that people ever really, the answer was generally no, and I don't think that people ever warmed.
I answered yes, but that's okay.
I don't think, well, of course, journalists,
come on,
professor would want to, but I don't think people ever warmed to him, and I don't think that that was his strong suit. He doesn't feel people's pain. He doesn't think it's important. And for him, I don't think it is. But in terms of changing the face of the city, applying honest government, and taking his role as someone who instituted new approaches and wasn't afraid to take risks, I think that he will go down as quite effective, not counting, of course, or not dismissing many controversial policies.
Right, and also the fact that he was an aloof elitist, a prideful plutocrat, and allergic to introspection.
That's why
throwing your words back at you from the introduction.
But that's why people didn't want to have lunch with him. But at the same time, they thought those very same people said he was a good mayor.
Okay, Errol.
I think he was an important mayor, and it's not too soon to conclude that.
Right.
I come in the Koch administration, so I've got 4 mayors under my belt now, and I would say that he is one of the more important ones. You know, on the other hand, it's unclear how much you can take from this mayoralty and apply to any other mayoralty.
Okay.
Right, unless we have another billionaire mayor and so forth. I mean, he came in under very unusual circumstances. Right. He did not come up through politics as we know it. Therefore, you can't sort of feed back into politics as we know it what this mayor means. Now, the list of accomplishments, they are many, they are profound. I think what he's done for the school system is profound. There may be a reaction against it that prevents many of his reforms from lasting, but he made some steps. He made some steps in that direction. He tried, let's put it this way. I think he contrary to what many of his supporters say, was not immune to politics. It's just a different kind of politics. You might want to call it class politics as opposed to party politics. He didn't come through the party political system.
Right.
On the other hand, when you rezone 40% of the city, when you make these sweeping changes, when you are, as Joyce points out in great detail in the book, when you are in fact sort of immune to or distant from the symbolic side of the job, the connecting with people, the making people, the notion of making people feel that you represent them, you are connected to them. He
rather than their customers or producers
exactly.
of services in a market.
Right. I mean, his notion of it, and he didn't shy away from describing it this way, is that he's got a list of services, and he's going to sort of create the metrics with you about what's going to keep you happy.
The city is a corporation. He's the CEO.
And he's going to deliver it. And as we've seen with this last election in 2013, is that people are okay with that, but people want much more. People want other things from their mayor as well, and that was in many ways the basis on which they picked Bill de Blasio.
Angelo?
Well, I think, you do need some time away. I mean, I think right now, as we're reading the Daily News interview with his girlfriend, the first girlfriend, I guess you call her, and she was saying, you got to give it time because people are kind of getting sick of him now these days as current mayor. So the same thing happened with Ed Koch. People just got sick of him. Last year it was too much. But then they kind of, years later, people were kind of like, looking kind of more friendly at the person. I happened to, I had dinner once with Bloomberg when he first started. We were criticizing him for not appointing enough Latinos. I keep doing this every mayor, and I got a
and governor and president.
I got a free dinner out of it.
Hey,
very charming, and that was the last time I met with him. But I think one of the
were you charming?
Well, of course.
Oh, of course.
Always.
Sorry.
A free meal.
Hey, come on.
But what was interesting was, I remember at that time, the issue I was concerned about was also what was happening with the school system now that he was taking over the school system directly as mayor, and the fact that I was concerned about the role of parents. And it's a theme that I think, one of the things that I think has been his biggest weakness, and that is the way that he really hasn't promoted civic participation in the city. In terms of all the communities. And that's one of the things that really, I think, struck me as, very effective in many areas. But I still remember that meeting of the panel of educational priorities, where he just kind of they disagreed with him and he just sacked the members and replaced them with his people. I thought that was amazing that he had that kind of authority, and that was the kind of thing that really was discouraging for a community like I do a lot of work with the Latino community, of feeling outside of the process. All these things are going on, this gentrification, all these really interesting things that the mayor was doing, but yet there was so much of the city that really felt not engaged, not a part of it. And we see that certainly with parents. And I think that was, to me, one of the biggest kind of, negative aspects of the way he approached the governance in the city. On the other hand, what was interesting was he showed that, in fact, government does matter and that you can, in fact, shape things in government. I think up until the time of Giuliani did that as well, you felt that the mayor had no control over things. Things were out of control. I think that's important in terms of that discussion we're having today about, in general, about the role of government. And I think, if anything, Bloomberg and Giuliani showed that you can, in fact, lead and you can actually make changes and use government in a very positive way. And I think that's
I would add Koch to that, actually. I don't mean to go down memory lane here, but
I
think, we were still coming back.
Well, I just wasn't old enough to make that reference.
I think it started to change.
Stop.
Started to change under Koch, and then it really kicked in under Giuliani, and Bloomberg continued it. But I would echo what Errol said, which is I don't see how there can ever be another Bloomberg.
No,
I
think he's sui generis.
And it's not only that he's sui generis because of his wealth, and somebody that wealthy chose not to spend all of his time, as he once said to me. He said, "How many golf games can you play?" Actually, he plays a lot of them, but nonetheless, how many? And how many yachts can you? What do you do with a yacht? Sail. Whatever you do with a yacht.
Whatever.
Obviously,
I'm a working class kid.
Obviously,
from Queens.
not
I mean,
my
yachts,
thing.
please.
But he really feels very strongly about public service, and apparently always have. But how will we ever see anybody like he not only has all the money that he has and is giving it away and has given away throughout his 12 years as mayor, and some people have raised questions about that, including me, both positive and negative points to that. But look how he got elected. He never would have been elected. He got elected in such a fluke.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the first time, forget it.
Yeah,
I mean,
perfect
Mark Green was right. It's a perfect storm. 9/11, Rudy Giuliani becomes a saint. The Democrats start shooting one another, and Giuliani supports Bloomberg. Bloomberg spends $75 million
exactly.
on. Yeah. He was on. The Yankees were playing in the World Series. He was on more than Derek Jeter.
Yeah.
So you're right.
So I mean, you put it. How can you ever get that? So can he be a paradigm for any other mayor?
See,
I wonder.
My feeling is, the question is he an anomaly or is he a paradigm? And maybe neither, but I really think he's an anomaly that you'll never see his like again.
I go with anomaly.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean everything he did.
Right, no,
is
in
an
a policy
anomaly,
sense, no.
Oh, no, that's right. I mean, I think, though, to follow up on something Angelo said, I mean, one man's civic participation is another man's special interest politics, right? And so you read some of what the Bloomberg cabinet are saying about him and what they like most about him. They're saying, well, he was not afraid to go against the grain and he didn't care about the politics. And it's like, well, if politics is always a dirty word, then that's a great thing. But if politics is also the means by which people who don't have a lot of wealth and a lot of visibility
or govern each other, period.
Sure. Then there's something kind of wrong with spending as much money as he did, and not just the money that he spent on the elections, but the money he spent to buy off a lot of the civic voices that otherwise might have risen in opposition to him.
I wonder if most people know about that, though. It sort of never got, as I felt, as much attention as it should.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, but it's clearly the private use of his wealth, the philanthropy, the $200 million that he distributed, not only provided valuable services, but really bought off opposition.
Well, this is what I meant about class politics. I mean, look, when he was trying to get the third term and he was trying to get the term limits thing pushed through, right around the same time, and I discovered this just kind of through a fluke. It's not like I was reporting or anything. I was just talking to people, and it turned out that he, gave a major contribution to the NAACP and other civil rights groups. He had them to his mansion. He wined and dined them and gave them some money. And all of a sudden, one of the voices that one would have expected to hear, raising questions about the Voting Rights Act and other aspects, the troubling aspects of the third term bid, they just kind of shut up.
Oh, one of the images that really always stuck in my mind, Bloomberg, was when they had the hearings on the third term issue. And you may have recalled they televised this thing all day, and people came out, and everybody was against it. And Bloomberg was just sitting there and just listening, and kind of like this. And you knew all along the whole thing was baloney. It was a whole sham. They had bought off people. He had this thing fixed. And that image is always in my mind.
But I have to say, I do want to tell an anecdote.
Yeah, let me tell the Joyce anecdote.
I know she's going to tell this.
I mean, Joyce wrote the book. It's going to come out. It's going to be definitive. And there we are on the floor of the council. And there's Joyce and Bill Cunningham. And Joyce is just shaking her head because it's gone.
They're writing a new chapter.
No, I know what you said. You said 4 more years. I think that's what you said. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I also, I really think that he would have gotten the third term through the city council, period, because the city council also got a third term. And plain and simple, whatever his spending was, whatever his persuasive powers through his contributions, basically the city council, most of the 51 members, bought themselves a third term too. That was the strategy. That was the basic strategy.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody asked me when Christine.
It was a confluence of interests.
When Christine Quinn asked me if I knew when Christine Quinn decided in favor of a third term, because she had been against it.
Sure.
I said, was she ever against it, really? I mean, because she was going to get another term. So, and a platform from which to run. Yeah, right.
But the fact is that Bloomberg had the option of, in fact, going that route, and he didn't. And that's the thing.
The referendum route.
Yeah.
They waited on purpose so they wouldn't have to do it. He always believed that democracy was sloppy.
Yeah.
and that you avoided it as much as possible. And you made a comment, and I've used it before. He didn't feel your pain, and not only didn't he feel your pain, he didn't want to feel your pain.
Well, there's an anecdote that I tell many times. It's in the book, but it comes from one of his top aides. He was mayor. It was first term. He was just getting used to the job, and very early there was a water main break in the Bronx. And Bill Cunningham, one of his advisors, and others said, well, let's go, we're going to the Bronx. And he turned to them and he said, hi. And then, well, there's a water main break. You should get up there, show your support for the people, get on the 6 o'clock news.
Right.
There used to be such thing as a 6 o'clock. We didn't have 24/7, right? Maybe we did, but there was still a 6 o'clock news. And he looked at them and he said, I'm not going up to the Bronx. I can't do anything about a water main break. What am I going to do? Go down there and turn this? He said, I'm staying in City Hall, and if there's anything I can do here, I can accomplish more here than I can in the Bronx. And he did not accept, he did not understand the importance of connecting with the public. I think to this day he doesn't, and I don't think he makes any apologies for it. I think he would say, I have other strengths.
But you said, it was absolutely apt, and that is, he doesn't appreciate the symbolic elements of politics. He's really a manager, not a leader. A leader inspires, has a vision, and sort of drags you along with it. Mike Bloomberg doesn't do that. It's more technical.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, he would disagree with that, but
Yeah,
here again, I think, sort of class politics. I mean, really what was driving a lot of the educational reform, and I don't think they would even dispute this if you ask them, up front, Joel Klein and some of the other chancellors, is that they wanted to keep the middle class invested in the public school system. They didn't want to see them run off to the suburbs or go to private schools. And so they specifically tried through the Gifted and Talented program and a number of other things to offer alternatives that would keep the middle class interested in the public school system. Now, to what end? What's the point of that? If you look at it in the broadest sense, is it a good thing? Yeah, it's probably a good thing. But
probably, it's an enormous thing.
Well, but if you're in one of the schools that didn't do well, that didn't get favored, that got maybe bumped, displaced, or felt disrespected because of the charter schools and so forth, then this isn't such a great thing. And those are the people who now have put the broad reform agenda at risk because they are so angry at him because of how he treated them in one meeting or another. Or
that's suggesting that the two are mutually exclusive, and I don't think that trying to retain the middle class in the public schools, which is a stabilizing influence, and is necessarily means that you have to ignore those who are not middle class.
No, believe me, as a parent, I'm glad they tried.
Right.
I'm glad they tried. But here again, the charter school wars, the friction, the battles with the union, the constant talk about accountability, but then it turns out accountability really was being sort of used as a cudgel rather than
and
a conversation.
Accountability for others, not city time, 911, etc.
Right. Accountability for some and not others.
Right.
And it makes you wonder and worry whether the good parts of this are going to get thrown out, because there are a lot of people now who are pushing in the other direction.
I think there will be a reaction.
Angelo, looking at the communities out there, particularly the Latino community, I mean, what is the view of that community on Bloomberg, and also what do you see as the positives in the administration over the last 12 years and some of its misses? I mean, sort of a hits and misses.
Well, one of the things that's also always been interesting to me is, the Latino community has gotten all this publicity and, the importance of the Latino vote, all this kind of stuff. And but when you look at the reality, I've always been struck by the fact when I talk to Latino leaders and Latino community activists, how they feel so marginalized from the political process. And clearly in the Bloomberg administration, there was that feeling that out of the 11, for example, top positions at City Hall, only one was a Latina, a deputy mayor who was very low profile. Yeah. And the feeling that somehow when he had his press conferences, groups like Latinos and people of color really were not present. Mm-hmm. And that was something that really, I think, struck a lot of people as again, this idea that, look, the city is 2/3 Black, Latino, and Asian, but you couldn't tell by what was going down at City Hall in terms of who was taking leadership positions, and that was a constant kind of a problem It was difficult also because you got into this post-racial discussion as well, and I think Bloomberg embraced that very well in saying, look, I'm not going to get into a special interest group politics. And Errol always uses the term tribalism, which I always go, and you know, that feeling. And I think Bloomberg, and as he focused on various issues, didn't take those kinds of things into account. How do you bring in communities like this as partners? And there was that issue of buying off people. I saw it in a very evident way, how people would get grants, and all of a sudden they're taking positions supporting Bloomberg out of that really were uncharacteristic. So you had that kind of process going on. So in the Latino community, when you looked at the opinion polls, for example, one of the biggest problems we've had is the polls sometimes don't even include Latinos, definitely don't include Asians. Yeah. And so what you start seeing is that there's no coverage of the kind of racial divisions that continue to exist in the city. And clearly on the Bloomberg, when you looked at the approval ratings, you saw whites very approving of Bloomberg, right. Blacks and Latinos not so. And somehow that kind of got erased because the media was no longer covering or interested in those kinds of divisions. Bloomberg, obviously. So there was that constant problem in terms of this kind of racial divisions.
But there are some policies.
But you see it in the De Blasio win, don't you?
Yes.
Exactly the response to that.
But you know what I think? Not at all, Doug. I think what gets lost when we talk this way, which we should, I'm not questioning that, are some of the policies that affect all communities, whether people,
right.
and the rezoning and rebuilding of the city is
physical transformation.
Physical
I think has to be
the anti-smoking,
and
which everybody's kind of
but the rezoning, for example, has a racial dimension. And we talk about gentrification
and class
and the impact on.
But then again, he put the transfer station, one of those transfer stations, over real opposition on the Upper East Side.
I've been writing for a year, for 10 years.
Okay,
I've
go
been
ahead.
writing that
Go.
The 20-year solid waste plan is one of his greatest legacy achievements, and you know it'll be another 10 years before people recognize.
In fact, and she got hammered for it. So you've got the physical transformation of the city, zoning 40%, very pro-development. You've got sustainability and climate change, where he's a leader. You know, use of data, public health, waterfront. There's a lot of
There's a lot
of stuff. Here's where it all comes together. It's you know, and this is where you have to start talking about the next Bloomberg. You know, and I would say to some of his aides sometimes, it's like the problem is not what this billionaire has done, although we can fight about one policy or another. The problem is what the next one might do. Number one. And the problem, as Angelo points out, is what was the criteria by which we got to the solid waste plan, which happens to be beneficial? Well, he had a guy named he had a guy named Eddie Bautista, who's a well-known activist who pushed and pressured and maneuvered and compromised here and there and stayed on it. And it's old-time politics.
Yes, the image is, the narrative.
It just wasn't a party organization.
The narrative is that Bloomberg's apolitical, that he judges everything on its merit. Politically, he certainly didn't. He understood the tribal element, the on-the-ground element of the politics.
If he didn't, people around him did.
Yeah, well, but then he understood it because he hired them. He knows his stuff. Also, what sort of rankled a lot of folks was his belief of him as sort of the philosopher king, the plutocrat as philosopher king, that I'm so wealthy that I don't have to listen to anybody and I can somehow wisely determine what the public interest is and act on it. But in addition to that, he had the will and the intelligence to do it. It's more than money. It's the will and the intelligence.
I think he would argue that if he didn't, he'd be paralyzed. That's what I think.
Yeah.
I think we shouldn't forget stop and frisk.
Yeah.
And
I've got that on the misses rather than on the pluses, but go ahead.
And we shouldn't forget, obviously, income disparity. Which I think has been vastly distorted, not in terms of the disparity, but in terms of what he or any mayor can do.
Sure.
Because most of it is state, federal, and even international.
Well, it's not even that. It's even more basic. It's even more basic. This is a capitalist city. And in fact, capitalism operates under I mean, you need income inequality. You know, you need those kind of inequalities to make the system work. So it's a balancing act in terms of, how is it that you mitigate the negative
Right.
aspects of that? And it's a kind of thing where, it's not that straightforward. I mean, the kind of rhetoric you have with the de Blasio thing, it's almost like he's going to eliminate income inequality.
Can't do
well, no, you're talking about much more basic change in the society. And that's the kind of thing that I think Bloomberg, did he leave, his legacy is, did he leave enough there for someone like a de Blasio to kind of take and move
Well,
forward? Or did he create a situation where he created some dead ends in some policy areas that for some
he would
Yeah, that's a
argue
good
that
question.
basically a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
That's what if anyone would ask him, and
Yeah.
people have, he would say if you have a thriving city, it helps everyone.
And growth is good.
De Blasio, and wealth is good, and we want Russian oligarchs.
So he went up. He went up against the Pope on that one. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. So
Nice.
exactly. So he has a very distinct economic philosophy and political philosophy,
Sure.
and he does not apologize.
No, not
That's
at
true.
all.
I mean, but one of the things, as we all know, one of the bills that's going to be sitting on the desk when the mayor walks in on January 1st are the expired union contracts.
Oh,
right?
brother.
yeah,
And
$7 billion
and
worth.
it always gets talked about as a political decision that, well, we're not going to let the municipal unions run this town anymore. That's sort of the rhetoric you heard
Oh,
out
yeah.
I heard that before.
But let's
Decades,
let's
Joyce.
look at the Keynesian sort of economic reality as the son of of a retired cop. I mean, this matters a great deal. Being
Yes.
able to move from public housing as we
Sure.
did into a house that we owned
Sure.
on a cop's salary, raising 5 kids. That you could do it in the 60s and
And
70s.
you've got to
And
demonstrate
it's
it
not
can be
even
done. Right.
It's not even conceivable now, especially if you're
exactly
going to impose zeros ad infinitum on them, saying
Right.
no retroactive raises,
Yep.
no forward-going
Yep.
raises, no conversation, no contract, no nothing. And this is not a good part of his legacy, because while he can technically say, oh yeah, the budget was balanced when I left, the next mayor is going to have to deal with that. And it's going to be through politics, whether it's at the collective bargaining table or some other means.
Or in the streets.
Or in the streets. It's
gonna happen.
got to get dealt with. And it's not at all clear to me that it is economically wise to assume that 300,000 people will work on average with almost no increases.
Okay, so what we've done here today is we've done sort of the first draft of history. You've done sort of a second draft of history in the book, but you're right, it's too early. So we need some time. We need the comparison of the de Blasio administration, for example. Maybe we come back in 6 months and look at it again, and then 6 months after that.
Takes even, LaGuardia is like, he's number one on all those polls.
Yes,
right? The best mayor.
I voted for him 3 times in that one thing.
Do you know that Fiorello LaGuardia had a terrible temper? He could be nasty. He could be incommunicative.
My
yes,
type of guy.
But but he also had a sense of humor, and all of that sort of got lost through history, and
Sure.
now he's a hero. So
Right. My special thanks to Joyce Purnick, Angelo Falcon, and Errol Lewis for their analysis of the past 12 years of New York's leadership. Join me here next week on CUNY TV. Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.tv. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.